Shio, hello, and a warm welcome to the 17th speaker series, A Sense of Place, Indigenous Perspectives of Land, Water, and Sky. This series is hosted by the Indigenous Education Institute. Today's session is supported and funded by NASA HEAT, the Heliophysics Educational Activation Team led by Michael Kirk. My name is Dr. Nancy Maryboy. I am Diné and Tsalagi, Navajo and Cherokee. My Cherokee name is Tsawayuga, and I'm from the Cherokee Bird Clan. I'm also of the clans of the Diné, Betoni, Deer Springs Clan, and Senjakini, the Cliff Dweller Clan. I'm the founding president and executive director of the Indigenous Education Institute, which has been in existence for more than 25 years. We are located in the San Juan Islands and on the Navajo Reservation. I would like to begin today with a heartfelt acknowledgement of the Indigenous peoples of our Mother Earth to honor our many participants from around the world. Usually we acknowledge the land on which we are living or presenting, but in this day and age of virtual online realities and the pandemic of COVID-19, we wish to honor all Indigenous people around the world. I also want to acknowledge that I currently reside on the ancestral lands of the saltwater salmon people of the Salish Sea, who have called this place home since time immemorial. I honor the inherent and acquired treaty rights of these Indigenous peoples. The presentations in this series have been chosen to reflect an awareness of the foundations of traditional Indigenous thinking and living. In our native ways, everything is interconnected. So rather than a specific focus on biology, astronomy, or other separate disciplines, we will be presenting dynamic worlds of interrelationships and processes of reciprocity. An additional focus for the speaker series is expanding awareness and understanding of cultural differences and to support successful and diverse working relationships, whether it be in education, health, national resource management, astronomy, NASA, museums, and science centers, and tribal communities. I want to personally thank you for attending this webinar. The interest you have shown is heartwarming. We have over 620 persons registered from all around the world. And we have participants from Canada, Austria, Germany, Mongolia, Mexico, Puerto Rico, the United Kingdom, Albania, India, quite a few, Aparna, and the Netherlands and Uganda. It is also interesting and heartwarming for me that we have more than 85 different tribes represented in our registration for this presentation today. Before we continue, I would like to ask you to put any questions for the presenters into the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen and not into the chat box. This will enable us to better serve you towards the end of this presentation. Chris, you want to put on, just forget the slides for now. On April 8th, there will be a total eclipse of the sun, a solar eclipse, which will be visible in many parts of the United States. There will not be another one like this in the United States until 2032. As many of you know, there is a lot of interest in the April 18th global phenomena. What you see on TV and in newspapers is mostly from a scientific perspective. And there are big warnings on how to keep your eyes safe by wearing special protective glasses. But there's almost no mention of other cultural worldviews, such as Indigenous perspectives, which have existed for hundreds or even thousands and thousands of years. Today, we are honored to bring you the Indigenous perspectives of some knowledge holders from around the world, from the North, East, South, and West. To begin with, Dr. David Begay and myself, Dr. Nancy Maryboy, will talk about Navajo perceptions of eclipses. Dr. Aparna Venkatasan will talk about her Hindu heritage from India. Ron Aniksok, I'm hoping I say this right, Ron Brower Sr. will be speaking about his Inupiaq heritage from Barrow, Alaska, and he will be speaking to us today from Fairbanks. Tolga Gamba will speak about his traditional Mongolian knowledge from Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia. He had to get up the earliest. It's 3 o'clock a.m. in Mongolia time. And Alonso Mendez will speak about his Tzeltal Maya heritage of Chiapas, Mexico. I would now like to introduce Dr. David Begay, and I can see him. This is wonderful. He was having some trouble getting in this morning. So now I'm going to introduce David. I'll give you the mic, David. You're muted. David.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
You are unmuted. You are muted.
Hello.
We hear you, David.
Good. Let me first briefly introduce myself. My name is David Begay. I work with the Indigenous Education Institute with Dr. Maryboy. Among the Navajo people, eclipses have been a way of life from time immemorial. And they knew that looking directly at the sun can damage your eyes. So to avoid any damage, people encourage community people to stay inside during the eclipse to ensure no damage occurs. Hello.
Hello.
Damn. Hello.
We've got you, David.
Am I still on?
Yes.
Good. Yeah, it's eclipses are all about shadow and part of the people's worldview. And they believe that eclipses were a part of a much bigger natural cosmic order. And the order inherent in nature, there's a dynamic balance. Nature has its own way of rebalancing itself, and it goes through cycles, and eclipses are one of those natural built-in balancing process. I think what we're having here, there are going to be several Indigenous people from different parts of the country, and they will present their different knowledge, different perspective about the sun and how they interact with the sun during an eclipse. The extreme diversity of knowledge among the Indigenous people. Some people think that they have a lot of things in common. I think there's more diversity than commonalities. And a lot has to do with place-based knowledge. They live in different times, different places, different spaces. And so it's all different. And for the Navajo people, it's all descriptive of what they see. The sun eclipses, the movement, the different process. Just want to say something here, Navajo. For example, that translated as the sun made itself different. And I have all of this in the indigenous language, but I'll just read the English part. Another way to say it is the sun ceases to exist with a full light. Another one, the sun and the moon align with each other. Another one, the sun went behind the moon. Then another one, sunlight goes all the way around the moon in a ring-like shape. Another one, the moon completely covers the face of the sun. The sun came out of the eclipse, and a few more. I'm not going to go over all of them. So among the Nat people, it's a different way of looking at time. For example, from October to April, it's considered a cold climate season. And from April to October, it's also considered a summer warm season. And that's divided into spring, summer, fall, and winter. And then also our new year starts in the third week in January. Is a crescent moon and a full moon usually happens right there, and you could see the whole of the Milky Way going around the horizon. If you go look to the east, south, west, and north, you could see the whole of the Milky Way in a circle here. That's when our new month starts, our new year. So it doesn't start in January, it starts in February. So it goes all the way around, and then we also have our own. We have a sun calendar, and we also have a constellation calendar, and so the time is different. Our new day starts with the pre-dawn time, and in the Western it starts at midnight. 1 minute after midnight, and so we have different time, and I could go down the list and give you more, but this is all I want to present here at this time.
Thank you, David. I always am astounded of how precise our native languages are, and so descriptive, and so based on place. The hundreds and thousands of years of living in one place, and the knowledge that comes out of it, and that we can still access some of that today, I think is tremendous. So thank you very much. I will go ahead and talk a little bit more about Navajo eclipses. Dave, Chris, you could put on that picture just briefly of the Navajo Hogan, perhaps.
Coming right up.
Thank you. You just leave it up a little while. From time immemorial, for thousands of years, eclipses have been part of the human experience. Indigenous people from all around the world have their own unique worldviews based on traditional lifeways and languages and knowledge of place. Living through eclipses, whether they be annular or total solar, gives people a chance to reaffirm their human connection to the entire universe. Like the Navajo elders say, we come from the stardust. We are stardust. The sun is a star, our nearest star. To the Navajo, the sun is one of the most important living entities in the entire sky. It provides light, warmth, and nurtures every living thing. Just a minute here. It can also bring around negative impacts, as we see today with our technology, satellites, and swings in space weather. When we experience movements of the sun and moon that are out of the ordinary, out of the cosmic order, we react, and we go back to our traditional teachings of how to behave during these times and what we can do to bring back the order. Indigenous people knew how to predict eclipses. One of our northern Arapaho relatives, a Sundance chief, tells me, of course we can predict the eclipses. We are stargazers, and we closely watch the cycles of the sun and the moon. Navajo people have been watching the sky for thousands of years. When the sun is beginning to dim during the eclipse, as the moon gets closer to the sun, Navajos would observe that the plants and the animals were reacting to these changes, almost as if night had suddenly occurred. Many birds and other animals would prepare for their night sleep or night activities. To the Diné, the Navajo people, the event of an eclipse was neither good nor bad. It is just the necessary rebalancing of the cosmic order. It must be observed with reverence for a huge cosmic process. It is a time of renewal, of acknowledging cyclical patterns and relationships between the earth, the sun, and the moon. Traditional Navajo protocol says that one should respect the resetting of the cosmic order. Families would go inside their homes, sit quietly, pray, and offer songs. They would not eat or drink. They would tell stories related to the universal order and to the eclipse process. By not looking directly at the sun, they were protecting their eyes from harm. They did not have protective eyewear long ago. Today, on the Navajo Reservation, eclipses are still important. The Navajo radio station KTNN will announce the eclipse is coming. Many schools close down and send their students home. Just as there are many different ways of living, of worshiping, of religions on the reservation, there are different ways of experiencing eclipses. Some families, some individuals follow strict traditional ways. Others acquire protective sunglasses and watched every moment of the sun and moon's movements. They experience the rapture of totality. Some watch the shadows on the ground through interlaced fingers, or leaves on trees, or kitchen colanders, those little bowls with holes in them. There is no right way. It is up to the individual and the family. One elder I know told us that long ago her family was gathered in their home for an eclipse, but she really wanted to see and experience it. She noticed there was a bucket of water nearby where she was sitting. Carefully, she pulled the bucket toward her, and she noticed she could see the reflection of the sun as the eclipse proceeded. As she told us this, she grinned at us. That worked for her. Today, we can see the eclipse on TV, see photos in magazines, or outside with protective glasses. Those things did not exist long ago. So how people are deciding how to experience the eclipse is changing, but the traditional beliefs are still strong. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce my dear friend, Dr. Aparna Venkatasan. She is a Hindu with heritage and traditions from India. She is a professor and an astronomer, as well as a dark sky advocate at the University of San Francisco, California. She is deeply committed to developing respectful, co-created partnerships with Indigenous communities. And I'll turn the mic over to you now, Aparna.
Gratitude, Nancy, David, Indigenous Education Institute, and this wonderful circle for the opportunity to be here today. Brothers and sisters from around the world, welcome. I'm going to go ahead and screen share. I have just a handful of slides, which hopefully everyone is seeing okay. And I want to begin by sharing how we are right now in this period between the annular solar eclipse of last fall in North America and the total solar eclipse that we are approaching. And today I will share respectfully my own cultural knowledge of Surya Grahan, or the solar eclipse. I want to begin with respectfully acknowledging those whose ancestral homelands I live and work on the Raimatush Ohlone of San Francisco, and the Coast Miwok of Northern California. I honor and welcome the traditional custodians of the land, water, and skies where each of you are, and I honor all ancestors past and present, including this wonderful group of presenters today. I also want to acknowledge that I am not indigenous to this part of the world where I live and work, and I am here to respectfully share the Hindu tradition and perspective on eclipses as only one among over 1 billion Hindus in this world whose practices and traditions adapt and vary with time and place. So I share here with you today what my elders and communities have taught me in my half-century of living, and how celestial events and calendars are deeply woven into our days and years. As one of my community knowledge holders shared with me, astrology is calculation, our way of life is science. So my 3 slides are divided into my perspective, not as a scholar of these topics, but as your colleague raised in the Hindu tradition, as a woman and mother, and as an astrophysicist taking the long view. I could spend an hour on each of these slides, but you have my assurance I'll be ending on time because there's wonderful speakers yet to come, as there were before me. Hindu storytelling is deeply enmeshed with our calendars. Both have layers within layers, levels within levels. One is always aware that each story or calendrical moment is a very, very small part of a much broader framework of stories and calendars. So now I want to share with you the story of Rahu and Ketu, who I'm circling here, and just share a very brief story of their role in eclipses. They represent the head and the tail of a demon who was killed by the god Vishnu in a battle between the gods and demons as they churned the cosmic ocean using a serpent for the nectar of immortality. Rahu and Ketu are given a place in the Navagraha or planetary zodiac, even though they themselves are not planets. They represent instead the lunar nodes for solar and lunar eclipses. And what I mean by that is this figure, where the plane, Plane, of the moon's orbit around the Earth and the plane of the Earth's orbit around the sun, where the Earth and moon orbital paths intersect. So these are called the nodes, and the descending node corresponds to Ketu, and the ascending node corresponds to Rahu. So we hold these points in space in our mind mathematically, even if we cannot see them from where we are on Earth, giving us the power to not only explain current eclipses, but also to predict future eclipses. Rahu and Ketu represent chaos and confusion as they exact revenge by eclipsing the sun and the moon. They are considered a maleficent force affecting our health and digestion, so we take appropriate actions during their time of influence, which we do by fasting, saying specific chants, or just not going out at all. They are considered such powerful influences that they are given a place in the Hindu calendaring of daily time outside of the celestial 7, the sun, the moon, the 5 planets, through the Rahu Kalam, which are the hours between sunrise and sunset, and I've shown it up here, divided into 8 periods. Hindus usually avoid starting new work or auspicious activities during each day's Rahu Kalam. If you're interested today, that's between 2:50 and 4:20 California time. It is, however, okay to continue already ongoing work. So existing collaborations, chatting with people you're already working with. And very last, Rahu is also considered the king of meteors. So on this slide, I'm just sharing a few images that relate to Hindu timekeeping and how Rahu and Ketu are shown as serpents. Hindu timekeeping, like so many global faith calendars, is rooted in a lunar calendar, What we are seeing here are ancient stone carvings, and I'm trying to just circle them here, from the many glorious stone temples of southern India, showing Rahu and Ketu as serpents approaching the moon during eclipses. Practicing Hindus are keenly aware of the short-term and long-term lunar cycles in their life, starting from the hour of their birth to the daily and annual socio-cultural calendars. New moon and full moon are extremely sacred, with new moon being a time when the ancestors visit and are welcomed with food. So most people know what phase of the moon they are born at, as well as when their important life events happened relative to their lunar calendar. My own father passed at new moon at the start of the pandemic in March 2020, and as his only child and daughter, the moon has since become my personal grief calendar. This last picture here shows a pregnant woman about to give birth. As women, many of us already know how closely connected our bodies and their cycles are to the cycle of the moon. As a woman raised in the Hindu tradition who is also a mother, I share that pregnant women in our tradition are supposed to avoid going outside or being exposed to the harmful eclipse rays during a solar or lunar eclipse. These are thought, again in our tradition, to cause deformities in the unborn child. Certainly during my pregnancies, while I was frantically typing at my laptop, my parents looked up the eclipse calendars well in advance and reminded me to not go outside and be exposed to the harmful eclipse rays. It's tempting to view these as superstitious, historical Hindu traditions, but what I found most interesting in talking with this wonderful group I'm presenting with today, as well as our broader Indigenous teams, is that these views are shared by many other cultures, not just Dene, Navajo, but also, from my best understanding, of Maya and other traditions on pregnant women and the viewing of eclipses. So I want to leave us with a couple of last points. I know the whole goal of science over the last 2 millennia in the Western tradition is to move away from this view that we are special, in space and time, but rather to view us as one of many stars, one of many galaxies. We're not at a special point in space and time, but we are very fortunate in one aspect with our moon. Despite being so much smaller than the sun, it is a very interesting coincidence that its apparent size in the sky is near identical to the apparent size of the sun, which is much bigger and much farther away. So that means we get to have a total solar eclipse in a way that no other world in the solar system has. I'm just going to play a little preview of this. It's got some music that you can hear, which is maybe helping you relax. But again, this is what much of Southwest Mexico to North America will see in just about 11 days. So very exciting. And again, it's very, very special where we are. So I'm just going to get this little video going with my last slide, which is what eclipses look like from Mars. Again, as adorable as that lumpy potato of a moon is going across the sun, the view from Mars, the Perseverance rover. Again, this emphasizes to me how special our eclipses are from Earth. So I want to end with the long view as an astrophysicist, that our views of eclipses are changing right now. I began my career in planetary astronomy, which has significantly evolved and changed over my lifetimes, recasting how we view ourselves in place and time. Because the very place from which we're seeing eclipses is changing. We're not just seeing it from Earth anymore, but we're seeing it, for example, here's a view from the Mir space station. The view from the Mir space station of a solar eclipse, and then the Japanese Solar Observatory, Hinore's view in X-rays high above the Pacific Ocean, that's May of 2012. the view from the Mars Perseverance rover of the solar eclipse from Mars. And finally, looking at again another view from space. So as we move out into the cosmos, starting with the moon and Mars, our views of eclipses are going to change. So our stories, our traditions are going to change, and that'll impact not just our art and science, but also the legacy, the stories, and the traditions that we leave for our youth and our shared future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aparna. I never get tired of hearing you present, and I love the Hindu aspects and the story narrative that go with it, with the eclipse. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm now honored to introduce our next speaker, Anikswak. You can tell me if I'm saying it wrong. Ron Brower, Sr., from the far north in Barrow, Alaska. Mr. Brower's knowledge and experience with marine mammals and the Arctic environment makes him an especially keen wildlife observer. He was involved in the development of the North Slope Borough Commission on History, Language, and Culture, and was the founding director of the Inupiat Heritage Center Museum. He also teaches the Inupiat language at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And there's probably a whole page of other wonderful things he has done. So I'm going to stop here and turn the microphone over to Ron.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you for the invitation to participate in this webinar. And it's you're touching on something I've been working with the elders up north for quite a number of years. I was involved in establishing our Inuit Circumpolar Elders Conferences in 1980, where we gathered in Greenland. And to our surprise, we're all quite for our first gathering, including our Siberian relatives, we found out that we all speak the same language and we all understood each other at different levels, of course, depending on how far apart we are. But the closer and the further we are, we understood our language quite easily among each other. Inuit live in Arctic Siberia, across the Arctic America, and over to Greenland. Ours is a hunting culture that shared the same history, language, and cosmology. At high latitudes, 71 degrees latitude and above, Sheila, referring to weather, is very different, and the sun and the moon cycles feature characteristics that play an important role in Inuit astronomy and have a place in our stories passed down over generations and our mythology. Those of us who grew up in the old Inupiaq traditions, where dog teams were much the means of travel, required us to learn about weather. In those days, every village had a weatherman. It may be a boy or a girl trained since early childhood to study the skies, the stars, the sun, and the moon to determine the kind of weather to expect on that day. Eclipses of the sun and the moon are rare events in the Arctic regions, but were well remembered by our elders. The word pula refers to eclipses and is used before both the sun and the moon. One may say Stepenik Bularo, the sun eclipses, in reference to solar eclipse events. Or one may say Datkik Bulasako, the moon visits, in reference to the lunar eclipse. The solar eclipse event, or one may say that an eclipse of the moon is considered among Inuit as bad and feared for unknown reasons, the reasonings going so far back into our mythology, dealing with the sun and the moon. And in some communities, beliefs and rituals pertaining to solar and lunar eclipses are directly tied to the sun and moon mythology. During the dog team days, women would pinch a dog's ear. If it cries out, it would be a sign that the world is not yet coming to an end after all. Solar eclipses were dangerous to men because the sun is the mythological sister of Aligna, who is the Malina, who became the sun, seeks revenge upon men. Aligna, the young man who molested his sister, became the moon. Therefore, the lunar eclipse is considered dangerous to women, and as he rejoiced in women dying, whereas the solar eclipse was dangerous to men. When I was about 9 years old, in the fall of 1957, a solar eclipse happened that was a frightening experience, as some of our community members felt great fear of some catastrophic event to follow. Referring to catastrophic epidemic events, which were recalled in fear from the past when similar events occurred. We were in awe because it got dark, as if the earth had put on a shade to darken our skies. Because we were just going into winter, if I recall correctly, it was getting colder rapidly when the eclipse occurred. As some folks were commenting, we could see our breath. Soon after the sun came back, we could not see our breath after the sun came back out. So, but the elders recalled their childhood memories and talked about the events of their time when it was thought that foreboding disaster or epidemic would follow. It was up to the local Angatko, the shaman, to learn the cause and make amends that appeased the afflicted. We were also a people gathered from the country to Barrow, Alaska, the settlement, traveling by dog teams. When nothing happened, the fears of old were shaken off, and the second ruler is seen more as a natural phenomena. Above 70 degrees latitude, to the Inuk hunter, the winter moon was a time to travel with the dog team. The moon shines at its brightest, lighting up the snow, and all is visible brightly in the brightly lit snow on Earth, while the sky is pitch black. During the time of Dara, of total darkness, a week before Thanksgiving today, when the moon was not visible and the stars did not shine in the sky, this marked the time that was coming when Kamak, light, could be barely seen on the horizon. Each day it will start getting brighter, driving Dara away from Kamak. Twilight with no shadows hanging in the air for a few days. Then the moon begins to as a sliver, and the stars return to the sky. The time of Dara is slowly driven away by the brighter moon, and the Kiyoyaki, the northern lights, appear, sometimes white, other times green, and still another time reddish in colors. Rarely did the northern lights colors glow in the sky. The snow would take on these colors, making Arctic denizens visible from their body heat. A large fog-like mist barely shining, and its dark background told us where the caribou, the tutu, was. The dog team would be aware of their movement, and in the glow of the northern lights, reflecting from the snow, and made visible in the darkness of the sky, approached them in stealthy silence. The caribou did not run. Sometimes in the coldest time of the night, it seemed like the northern light, the Kiwi light, the northern lights were nearer to the ground and make ice crystals flash in the air, flash colors as they fell to the ground. It was like we were in a land of ghostly shadows as the snow brightened up from the reflection of the Kiwi eye. It was wondrous to see. The dogs would huddle, and in their breath would also glow from the northern lights in the sky. The tutu caribou would not know what to do as some fell from the thunder of the rifle. So, and suddenly one recognizes it's humans close by and standing on their hind leg, making the tutu sign of danger, start running. As they ran, we could see the heat cloud trailing them, glowing ever so faintly from the Kiwi night above. Eclipses of the moon, the Tatke, were feared from time immemorial, as it was thought he was the bearer of epidemic. It was believed that making loud noises, making gestures, and yelling was thought to frighten the Pulasa, the unwanted visitor, the moon, and it becomes the local Angatko, the shaman's responsibility to extract the cause, to appease the being living there, to save the people. It was the season where we could boil meat. Rare is this as we changed our ways and replaced the dog team with a noisy snow machine that travels so fast one did not have time to be with nature in its purest form. Civilization had come upon us, and this vision of life has passed on, and new ways draw our attention. There is what we live through in the Arctic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I could just visualize everything you were saying, and it was like we were up there with you. Thank you so very, very much, Ron.
Thank you for that. Thank you to say something.
And now it's my great pleasure to introduce my good friend, Tulga Gambat, who is a traditional Mongolian knowledge holder from Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. Tulga has worked many years with traditional herders, focusing on Mongolian cultural knowledge and language. He has been a strong advocate and supporter of the herders' associations in Mongolia. The image of stargazing in the Gobi Desert, photographed by me and featured on our poster, which you all saw when you registered, shows Tulga with Tutu George, a renowned leader of the herders. David and I were there with Tulga that night, and it's a night we'll never forget. Sharing stories of Navajo and Mongolians, and we were the little brother and sister, and they were the older brother and sister, as is appropriate, because the DNA, ancestral DNA, says that Navajos and Mongolians share DNA, and no other tribe in the United States does that. So I will now hand over the microphone, the virtual microphone, to Tulga, who had to get up at 3 a.m. to join us. That's in Mongolian time. So Tulga.
Thank you, Nancy. And thank you all for having me. It's a great pleasure and honor to connect with you all and share our traditional knowledge for the greater good and awakening the forgotten, almost forgotten knowledge to share with the world. It's most exciting thing that I can do, So thanks for having me. So for my presentation, I will explain a little bit about the Mongolian traditional in the first, and then I will try to explain with my best knowledge and best words what the solar eclipse could mean for a Mongolian traditional knowledge. So let me share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Mhm.
So yes. So first of all, the Mongolian nomads lived thousands of years in the nature. So to survive in this Mongolian harsh nature, you have to follow the order of the nature. For example, in the summer here in Mongolia is above 40 or 50 degrees Celsius. And in the winter is also minus 40 or 50 degrees Celsius. So the temperature changes almost 100 degrees. So you have to be very careful and very knowledgeable to survive in this Mongolian landscape. So the Mongolian nomads have connected with nature so deeply that they understood every sign of the nature and every cosmic order of this playing, how they play out and how the nomads have to act on it. So they became one with the nature and they became one with the cosmic order in things. So that's why the traditional religion is shamanism. But since 400 years ago, the Buddhism came into our land. So there are lots of people who believe in Buddhism these days. Almost 80% of Mongolians believe in Buddhism. So in Mongolia is very spiritual because every land that you will see in this Mongolian space has a owner that has in spiritual form there has a owner. Sorry for my words. It's 3 in the morning and my brain is a little bit lagging. Excuse my words. So every place has, every mountain and every river has its own spiritual owner. So at this picture, you can see there's a Mongolian yurt, and in that yurt, there is a grandmother telling stories to their grandchildren about the spiritual side of Mongolia. Because if we move from one place to another place, we have to respect the spirits of the nature, of the land. When we move, we have to say goodbye to the spirits of the land that we are living, and we have to respect them, and we have to do some rituals to protect the land so that the land cannot be destroyed by us. If we try to, or by mistake, destroy or do something wrong, the spirits will be angry and they will kind of attack us or seek some kind of revenge, something like that, because the spirit tries to heal the land every time and make sure that every animal is in order, because the spirit is working hard to keep nature in balance. And we human beings, we have to respect that. So the knowledge goes very deep in spirituality. And when we move to another new place, we have to also respect the new spirits that own the land. And we have to also do some rituals that we have to introduce ourselves, who we are and what we are trying to do and how long we are going to stay. And, we have to let everything know to the spirits so that the spirits accept us to stay on the land. So this is very spiritual place here in Mongolia. So you can see the nomads living in nature, in harmony, and every mountain and every river has own spirits that own this land and protect this land. So it's very, yeah, these modern days, we cannot see these things, but still to this day, the nomads believe in this and we respect it. For example, I have a picture here, like this one. You can see there's one woman sitting and cooking some tea. And that tea has a special ingredients. We put milk in this tea, and when the tea is ready, the first cup we offer it to the spirits. Like you can see at the second woman standing and offering the tea to the nature of the spirits of the land. So this is a very traditional way of respecting the nature and the spirits, and we do this still to this day. So this is the traditional way we live here in this land. And now I'm going to explain a little bit about this midday and midnight, because there's as you can see, before midday and before midnight, you can see at the 3 o'clock before the sunrise, just before the sunrise, approximately 4 o'clock, just before the sunrise, there is a pitch dark moment for about 15 minutes. It's about from 3 o'clock, 45 minutes to 4 o'clock in the morning. So that period of time, 15 minutes, it's pitch dark. And when the pitch dark moment comes, every people and every person have to go inside the home, because that 15 minutes of pitch dark time is very active. It's a very active time when the spirits are awakening. So sometimes strange things happen when that pitch dark time activates. The spirits go very actively, and sometimes some people, when they're riding their vehicle at that time, the motor suddenly stops and the driver doesn't know what happened, and they can do whatever they want, but the motor does not start, because the spiritual activity is so strong that they can influence some vehicles and some materialistic things. And some herders, when they are riding a horse, at that time, there's also some strange activities, and then the horse just stops moving. You cannot do anything. You can hit horse, you can hit the horse, you can pull horse to move the horse, but the horse will not move. So the herder, some of the herders will piss on the feet of the horse so that the spirits will let the feet of the horse go, you know. So this is very, very strange, but this is how the things are here in Mongolia. And so that's why I thought, when there is solar eclipse, maybe there is a exact same circumstances with the spirit's activity. So that's why maybe I asked my wife about the solar eclipse, if she did know about something about solar eclipse. And she said, when I was little, my mother told me when there is solar eclipse, I shouldn't go out outside. And I was like, well, why? Why not? Why shouldn't you go outside? And she said, I don't know. She just told me that I should not go outside, and I did not go outside. So maybe some of the people that I've asked, the older people, they told me also they bring out some pan and some spoon, and they hit each other. They make so much loud noises so that they can scare the bad spirits away, something like that. So they have to make lots of noises to scare the spirits away while there is a solar eclipse. So maybe that's so this is very similar when every day in the almost 4 a.m. there's a pitch dark moment, and the solar eclipse that's going to happen in the April. Maybe there's a similar way of looking at it. Maybe there's things that we cannot see gets activated, like the spiritual side of it. So yeah, this is the Mongolian knowledge that I have found asking people. And sorry for my explanation. I'm a little bit nervous, so maybe this is why the Mongolian people thought that it's not a good idea to go outside when there's solar eclipse, and that you should make noises when there's a solar eclipse happening, you know. So if there's any question, I will try to explain more, but yeah, this is, I hope it's good enough to understand for lots of you. And yeah, Nancy, how did I do? It's
Great. That is so interesting. I'm so glad you came on and spoke about these things. And it makes me think of Genghis Khan. And I'm wondering if they ever used eclipses as a way with warfare, because some of the tribes in the United States in the 1800s, one in particular was Shawnee, had medicine people that knew how to predict an eclipse, and they were trying to have everybody in a group come together and join him to fight the settler people, the coming Americans. And so this shaman or this medicine man said, if you don't join me, I'm going to make the sun go away. It's going to die. And sure enough, because he knew his eclipses, it did go away, and the people were terrified, and so they joined him. And then, well, they were talking it over, and then he said, if you join me, I'll make the sun come back. And so after just a few minutes, they started to join him, and of course the eclipse was ending and the sun came back. So it made me think of Genghis Khan, because his face and statues are everywhere in Mongolia, it seems like. But anyway, Tolga, thank you so much for your talk, your presentation, and we will have time for some questions afterwards. So I can see there are already quite a few questions coming. But now it's my great pleasure to introduce Alonso Mendez, who is from Palenque, Chiapas, Mexico. I had the honor of being down there with him in Palenque one year, long time ago, at these magnificent ancestral ruins that are there. And it's really an amazing place. Alonso is a Tzeltal Maya cultural astronomer who has spent more than 20 years researching the astronomical knowledge of the pre-Columbian peoples of the Americas. Alonso continues his work in cultural astronomy as a research associate with the Solstice Project in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and the Maya Exploration Center of Austin, Texas. And he is currently living with his family, I believe, in the mountains of Taos, New Mexico. So Alonso, welcome, and I'll hand the microphone to you.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank you both, Nancy and David, for this kind invitation to join this important webinar, and all of my panelists, a very deep appreciation, and I've heard some very interesting things so far, and I've been making notes, and I'd like to address some of those as well in my talk. I want to respectfully acknowledge our place here in New Mexico. I live amongst the Pueblo Indians here in the southern part of the Taos County, and we're really grateful to be able to live amongst and to visit with our Pueblo brothers and sisters who, over the course of my life, I've been getting to know more and more, and always they refer to me as a brother from the South. And so I'm from a community in the highlands of Chiapas. My ancestral roots are Maya, Tzeltal Maya from the highlands, but over the course of my life, I ended up spending a lot of the time in the lowlands, in a place called Palenque, where I was I had the honor of working and participating in many of the investigations and excavations that took place in that very important site in the south. So I'm going to give a little discussion and talk about astronomy. You know, one of the fields that I kind of got into by accident, but was almost a direct growth from my work as an artist. So I worked as a project artist on many of the excavations, and thus was able to be exposed to a lot of the important information that was being gleaned from not just the hieroglyphics, but also the art and the architecture of the ancient people. So I'm going to give a little bit of a brief explanation of the astronomy of Maya, and hopefully I'll have time to get to some of the recent work that we did and the work that we're doing here in New Mexico with the Solstice Project. So I'm going to begin a slide presentation, which hopefully I can hold on a second. I have to share screen first now. Okay. Is it possible? Do you guys see that now?
Sure do.
Okay, great. Well, the Maya people, as all people around the world, the ancient peoples, they watched the sky and made careful note of the horizon. The horizon was a very important tool in watching the sky. And so we call ourselves horizon-based astronomers, because we use the horizon to mark very important moments in the course of planetary movement, as well as celestial movement like stars and other phenomena. And so this is a very easy way to keep track of the sky, oftentimes positioning oneself in an important place or a temple, and continue watching the sky over the course of many years and in many cases millennia. These people were a very important part of the society. They were not only astronomers, but they were also the writers and artists of the time. And so many of these artists would record those events and preserve them in bark paper books, of which we are very fortunate to have and to still have amongst us 3 primarily Maya books, and one other one that is Toltec and Central Mexican in origin. But these fellows were busy watching the sky and recording, and they and as well as many other Maya of the time were very interested in how we as people are related to our world and our universe. And so this world perspective was a very central part of astronomy and timekeeping. And so up to this day in modern Maya worldview, we see the world as a flat plane and quarters or quadrants in that space being occupied by very important mountains. And so the 4 quarters of the world were situated or were positioned with a great mountain, a sacred mountain. And oftentimes the movement of the sky or the celestial objects were seen to ascend or descend into the horizon through great trees. And so sometimes it was these trees that were positioned in those very important places on the horizon where the sun would descend. And they were called the bakabs, or the great holders of the sky. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And so this quadrilateral aspect of the worldview is a very important part of religion. And so we see certain offerings being placed in very a very particular way, shapes that we call a quincunx shape, which shows the 4 cardinal directions and a center point. This idea of the center was very, very important in Maya art. And so we see that time and again, and this will reflect upon also this idea of quartering, but also finding the limits of space in Mayan space. Space that was not only on the horizontal level, but also on the vertical level. And so up and down was very important quadrants of space. We're very fortunate as Maya to have one of the few ancient Maya scripts and language, a written language that was very, very complex in many ways. It was a phonetic language. It used symbols also, so we call it a logo phonetic system. And so early on, we began to understand this language, and great scholars over the past began to decipher slowly and little by little. And some of the first glyphs that were deciphered were actually the sun and the moon. Also, the images of stars and other astronomical objects, it's possible they were tracking as well. Oftentimes, these symbols were condensed and compiled into what we call sky bands. And so you'll see at the bottom of the register of this image a sky band, and that includes oftentimes the sun and the moon, Mars, Jupiter, the sky itself. And these are now what we understand as being representations of the ecliptic. And so these are the extreme, it's a band that rises up from the east to the west, where the 7 astronomical bodies that we typically watch are traveling within this band. And so these are very important in the artwork of the Maya, and where we see evidence of this astronomical knowledge. Ceramics were really a beautiful method to display this knowledge and in artwork. And because we see the sky as kind of a bowl above our heads, ceramics played a very interesting way to represent that knowledge, and the artwork is just so beautiful. We see well in the previous image the 2 twins, the hero twins here on the right, the sun and the moon. Once again, they're displayed on this one. And if you notice, very interestingly, at the center of the vessel is a turtle. And this was the representation of the earth. And we see the cracked turtle carapace and a central deity or character that we know as the corn god. And so this is the birth of the corn god right at the creation, the moment of creation, where his 2 sons, twins, the son, Hunahao, and we see his hieroglyphic name here, tagging him, and then the moon, Yashbalam, which means first jaguar. One really interesting detail, and I wanted to really focus on this piece a minute, was that this is the Earth here with the moon and the sun on either side is an astronomical observation. When does this occur? When you see the sun and moon poised on opposite sides of the horizon, well, we know it's a full moon. This is only when this event would occur is during a full moon. And the interesting thing about this, and this is from our research and understanding of Palenque over time, we got the opportunity to plug in some of the dates that are given as the start of the Maya calendar. This is the creation moment. This is in 3114 BC, when the calendar was said to initiate. Great events take place in the sky, but one of those events just so happens to be a full moon on that date. So on August 13, 3114 BC, there was a full moon. And so a vessel like this is just extraordinary because it actually records the actual sky on that date of the creation. So that was really cool to find that out. So we see the sun and the moon once again being very important in the creation mythology. They kind of balance the sky, but they also provide what we call maximum excursions and the how do you say, the maximum distances that those two astronomical bodies would move in, basically showing or defining what the ecliptic was. Now, the interesting thing about that is that a lot of architecture begins to embody this concept of creation, and so temples would be dedicated according to these events. And so that would define that this temple is a sacred space because it's behaving according to a creation myth. And so this was a really beautiful example and kind of a tradition that is held very deeply in the ancient traditions, but also we see throughout the world, I think, where people are beginning to embody an understanding of the sky into their architecture and art. Now, I'd like to turn our attention to a fairly recent discovery, or a discovery that was relatively recent in 2011, when in Guatemala, this is the map of the peninsula, or the Maya world, really. And then in the Petén region of Guatemala, a site named Xultun, which was explored all the way back in the 1930s, but recently was excavated by William Saturno and his team. And they discovered something really interesting to us as astronomers, because in this structure 10K2 in Xultun, which unfortunately was damaged by looters, but just by a miracle, parts of the very beautiful painting were preserved. And in this chamber, which is about a 10 by 10 square room, we find the possibility of this being a studio, or a place where astronomers were making notes and preserving their observations on their murals. And these are some of the images from the murals that a good friend and actually my mentor, who taught me how to do 3D rendering and drawing. She produced these reproductions of the art. And we see these very interesting characters sitting around, actually on the very bench that is being depicted or that exists in the chamber. And then on the wall, one of those little quadrants of the wall, a series of numbers were jotted down on the wall. These were identified by Anthony Avini and David Stewart as being lunar in content. And so this is where it begins to get very interesting with regard to eclipses. Now, eclipses, we had already been aware of the acknowledgement of eclipses and the possibility of tracking eclipses. We had been aware of in the so-called in the Dresden Codex, which is one of those three very important books that were recovered. On the Dresden Codex, between the pages of 51 and 58, there's a series of notations and inscriptions that describe groupings of day cycles that spend about 177 days, and so this is 6 months in our terms, 6 lunations, and over the course of a very long time, about 11,958 days, or 405 lunations. They would occasionally make a correction of a group of 5 lunations, and this this span of time of 405 lunations gives us a figure of 29.52593 days for each lunar cycle. This, interestingly, is only 7 minutes off the modern day figure, which is, of course, that bottom number there, 29.53059. That was really a kind of a key evidence that allowed us to see that they were tracking groups of lunations into periodicities that give us today's standard, as well as the standard for observation of an eclipse. Because as we all know, eclipses will tend to occur, or will often, almost always occur, within 6 months of each other. And this is a great example of the current eclipse, which had its previous eclipse or partner 6 months ago. And so this is a really interesting evidence and a place where we began to really understand that the Mayas were keeping track of this information and showing it and being able to teach it to their future generations. And over time, they were using these. These inscriptions are from the post-classic. These books are from the post-classic, but what was really interesting about the, and this is a reconstruction of the Shultun chart. This one was previous to that, and this is from the classic period, from about the 7th century. And so we see now evidence much earlier on of the same process of tallying groups of days into 177 or 178 days, and then groups of those into 5 groupings, giving us 886 days. So in other words, 6 lunations or 6 months and 30-month periods. So these this tally actually from Schultun actually even beats the Dresden Codex by about 5 or 4 days, because this one it's or 4 minutes rather, because this one actually brings the lunar cycle length to 29.53086 days, which is only 4 minutes off of our modern day tally. So this is giving a really great understanding and evidence for major lunar understanding. And so, as we know, the sun and the moon are very important, and the moon, especially at a solar eclipse, will be the critical one to keep track of. With that being said, I wanted to share with you guys a little bit about our understanding in Palenque, and which also relates to the moon. And this is a kind of an example of how this knowledge could have been shared and could have been utilized in their public artwork and their development of society and culture. So we turn now to Palenque, which is in the state of Chiapas. It's in the northern part of Chiapas, a really beautiful location and site where it's nestled up in the mountains with a beautiful look over the plains into the Gulf Coast. Palenque was the place where I began my work, and we began working on the mapping of the site, and through the course of 3 years developed a really important map of the site. And from that mapping, I was able to work with a team to develop these 3D renderings of the site, which are really one of my greatest joys and privileges to be a part of that study. And so we focus on this group, which is just at the base of this photograph here, or this rendering, this group that we call the cross group. And in the cross group here, 3 structures that were really critical. These were dedicated in 690 AD by a great king, the son of the great Pakal of Palenque, Kanbalam II. And he dedicates these temples as his opus magni for the celebration of his coronation. And it was particularly this date of his coronation that was really fascinating to us, because as you see on this tablet, which is the tablet of the sun, we call it the tablet of the sun, but in reality it was his coronation tablet, because up in the center cartouche that we see here was the date of his coronation, January 10, 684 AD. And that date was really interesting to us because it was actually sometime after Pakal's death. About 5 months had passed from Pakal's death, and we had always seen this as kind of strange, because normally a king will accede immediately after the death of his father. And so we didn't understand why. And so finally, when we began studying it, the date under in an astronomical program, we were able to see that this date actually coincided with a full moon, and not only any kind of full moon. This was a full moon at its maximum excursion during what we call the lunar standstill cycle. And so the moon was actually setting in the horizon at 300 degrees, which is the maximum that the moon will move in that on the horizon in that latitude. And so that year that we were studying this and made this awesome discovery, we immediately went to the computer and wanted to calculate when the next lunar standstill would be. And it just so happened that it was on that very year that we were studying this. And so in a really fortuitous stroke of luck, we were able to actually photograph the full moon at its northernmost standstill on December 15th, 2005. And so this was a really interesting and just a beautiful example, I think, of how astronomical knowledge can be used in the design and execution of public art and architecture. And so we see here in the floor plan of the temple how the temple is actually on its axis aligned to those very important dates. But then not only that, the axis across the diagonal is aligned to the summer solstice. And so in one temple, now we see incorporated into the design of the temple this statement about the sun and the moon at its maximum excursions being very critical and important in that in the moment of creation. Those understandings really brought us to in communication to a very important scholar and artist in her own right, Anna Sofer, who was working up here in the north with the Chacoan culture. And so Anna had previously already identified lunar standstill moments in Chacoan architecture. And so these are two examples that I can give. One, this is the Chimney Rock alignment that's set to occur actually this June 23rd on the summer solstice. Will be witness to another great standstill moment like the one you see here, as well as this one here in Peñasco Blanco in Chaco Canyon, where the perpendicular of the half circle or half lunar moon kind of shape of Peñasco Blanco aligns once again to the maximum excursion of the moon in the south. And so those are the kind of the interesting progression of our studies that have kind of brought together north and the south cultures, Chiapas and the southern tropical sites and the northern peoples of New Mexico. Something that more and more now we're beginning to see commonalities. It's very obvious that this understanding and knowledge was shared, and it moved, and people were teaching each other all as today we're doing the same or trying to do the same through this webinar, and it's very very gratifying to me to see and to hear my other panelists talking about this idea of space, because here we're talking about an understanding of the earth, really, our position on the earth and its relationship to the sky. And this is what's really kind of that we've lost a lot in our modern culture, is this idea that the earth really is primary to us, that this is our central location, this is our home. We maybe should be turning more to a geocentric perspective again. You know, it's when we begin to see ourselves, you know, in a great universe, and not the universe traveling around us, you know, that we lose that sense of space and that sense of centrality, and kind of seeing our world as the navel of our society. So that's a little bit of what I can share in this small time that we've had. But thank you, Nancy and I'm grateful to all of you guys for listening and sharing.
Nancy, you're muted.
Okay. Alonso, thank you so much for this presentation. It just boggles my mind how the Mayans went back thousands of years with these astronomical observations. No telescopes, just they did it. And it's so appropriate that you were the final speaker because you really put that into perspective, how we as humans are off track right now with the way we're looking, this way we like to think of a Western perception that we're so special, we're so human centric, I guess, maybe. But that is really awesome what the Mayans have been doing. And I really thank you for ending this wonderful webinar with those thoughts. All of you, this has just been a dream of mine. And I, we didn't know how it would turn out with so many people and so far away and such bad web coverage and things like that, but it worked. And the coyote just got in once in a while to mess things up, but he pretty much stayed away. He's our bringer of chaos, but with chaos also comes kind of a complexity feeling of things are going to be all right too. So this worked out way more than I couldn't have even imagined. So I know our time is getting short, but I want to ask Polly to come in here. And Chris, I don't know if we have to stop right at 1:30 or we can continue a little longer for people that want to stay on. What's your perspective?
There's no set stop. So as long as people are willing to stay engaged, it'll keep running.
That's wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to my dearest friend, Sister Polly Walker from the Cherokee Southwest Township in Albuquerque, who is usually and wonderfully our question and answer person. So, Polly?
But before I turn to the questions, I would like to say to the presenters, Wato, Aliga, thank you. I'm very, very grateful for what you shared today. I say, for my own self, my understanding of and my relationship with ECLIPSES has really deepened. And there are a number of themes that you spoke about that really resonate with me. And I see through some of the questions, and some of those themes are the balancing of the cosmic order that takes place through ECLIPSES, about respect, well-being, spirituality, and I was really impressed with the rigor that we see through your presentations. And for me, your work all put together is a really powerful example of two-eyed seeing. I know many of us can turn to the popular news or a Western academic journal to understand Western perspectives of ECLIPSES. But now we can bring that together with what you've all shared today to develop a two-eyed seeing of what's going to be happening very soon. And I want to turn now to some of the questions I think will inform the wider audience. The first person says, I'm a non-native educator doing a program for the Eclipse in which I want to talk about perspectives around the world. Is it appropriate, acceptable to share the information that I get today, even though the information is not from my culture? So open to anyone to answer that question.
Up north, we are used to sharing our information with other cultures and other research groups because we've been surrounded by it. And one of the things we do is share the knowledge that we have acquired and pass it on to other groups interested in learning what we are experiencing in our part of the world. So we have no problem sharing our information with other groups, because we all live in one place, and we're not going anywhere without you.
Thank
Thank
you. Thank you. Does anyone else want to add on to that? Does anyone else have concerns about sharing that knowledge?
I think that some of it is up to the individual tribes, how they guard their knowledge and what parts they keep within the tribal group, or what they feel comfortable sharing. And this goes back to different protocols of different tribes. So it's a hard question to answer. It's a beautiful answer that Ron is giving about sharing. And I think that's what this particular webinar is trying to do. And I think it, because of everybody's presentations, it really does show a wonderful value in sharing, and where we come together and touch with certain things that make us, you know, we're all Indigenous humans. And so I think that I've learned a lot just from listening to everybody. It's been wonderful. So it's a hard question to answer, because there are tribes that will not be allowed to share their knowledge. And I think the most important thing is to listen. And if they say they're not comfortable sharing, don't push it, just let it go. If they are comfortable, then they'll share what is realistic and what is appropriate from their tribe.
I'd like to add just a little something to that, and this is that in our work as Maya, we're privileged to be able to rescue and restore certain knowledges that have been lost to us in the past, and this is really an important moment, you know, not just for the Maya, but all Native peoples in the Americas and the world, because it really is showing a great knowledge of science. And this is something that is always, you know, ancient peoples and Native peoples have been excluded from that conversation, you know, that we didn't have that kind of knowledge. And this is really important for us to share this then, because we were able to show the world that indeed a lot of our traditions were steeped in that knowledge and that science. And I think that's going to help many of our newest generations, you know, to be proud of who we are, you know, as Indigenous people.
May I add
Yes.
on that? Okay. Yeah, of course we can share, and I will happy to share my knowledge, because the spiritual side is very important for us, and I think for the humanity too, because some kind of spirituality goes so deep that you have to search it within your DNA and also your ancestors, because some of the human problem has ancestral problem, like karma, you know. So you have to dissolve that. To dissolve that karma, you have to be very spiritually tuned into that, because some of the most of the Mongolian peoples I see here in Mongolia, they have a very heavy spiritual problem, but they don't realize it. They think it's my mind, or it's my, you know, feelings, but it goes way deeper, because I have experienced that in myself, because some things I cannot change because of my DNA, because of my ancestors. For example, I had the problem with my job and earning some money. My energy was not good, and I went to a shaman and also aura reading. There's aura reading, technical aura reading. You can see your aura on the screen. And there was a woman explaining to me, your father's side has a problem. And I was like, how do you know that? And she told me that the land, the spirit of the land of my father is, how do you say, the spirit wants me to offer something to them, because the spirit protected my ancestors my grandfather, my family, for generations. The spirit is connected with me, but I don't know that. I didn't know that. So since when I realized that the spirits of the lands are still connected with me to this day, I did some ritual and offered and opened my heart up to the spirits of the land. And I felt this great connection when I was there. Like I was like meeting my grandparents, like the parents that I didn't never knew, and I felt like so deep connection with the nature that I was like, the wind was telling me like, hey, Tolga, I know you better than you know yourself. And I was like, how do you know me? It's like, yo, your ancestors lived in this land, the spirits protected your ancestors. Your DNA is connected with us because the sheep is eating the grass of the land, and the land has some energy data on it, and the sheep is eating that grass. So the data goes into the sheep, and we eat the sheep for generations. So in other words, the land's information data is in my DNA, so that with that DNA data, I'm connecting to the lands of the spirits. So I am connected. So this is the spiritual side, and we all have that connection to the mother nature. So sometimes when I have a problem with work, with my mentality, with my feelings, I go to my spirits in my mind, and I offer the tea that I just that you guys saw, and I say, protect me, spirits, from this I don't know, bad bad evil eye of you. There's lots of spiritual attack, that I can receive. So I ask the spirits to protect me from all of that. And when I do that, I feel this feeling of love getting inside of me each time, and I feel with this energized. So maybe the lots of people should do that, not only to the spirits of the land, also to the sun, like Alonso said, and like Aprana and Ron. And it's like we are all children of this Mother Earth and Father Sky, We just have to acknowledge that. We just have to appreciate the sun, that every day, sun is ready for us, giving the light, giving the energy to us. Maybe we should give it a little bit back, like appreciate itself, something like that. So that's why I told my solar eclipse story based on the spiritual side. So I'm very happy to share whenever you need. Just ask, and I'll do my best to answer the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to all of you for such rich and such deep answers to this question. I'm going to turn to a different one. It focuses us on eclipses. It says, often when many cultures share a common tradition, like avoiding harmful rays from an eclipse, there is some physical reality we have yet to understand via Western science. Do you think this is an extension of the general don't look directly at the sun wisdom that becomes exceedingly important when an eclipse is underway, since everyone's tempted to look? Or might there be something more here? As an astronomer, I cannot readily imagine another harm mechanism, but I'm curious.
I believe that question is from Meredith Rawls, an astronomer at the University of Washington, and she is a friend and close colleague that I work with. And I think it's a interesting question because it allows us to be curious across our cultures. If so many different peoples across time and space have arrived at some common threads, what does that mean? Is it something to do with how we see ourselves in relation to place as part of being human? Is there actual fundamental physical effects unfolding here? Or does that difference not matter? because really it's shared knowledge. So I will just respectfully offer, other than my gratitude again for being with such a wonderful group of panelists, as I said at the start, I feel our ancestors are meeting today and listening to each other. And I'm really grateful for that. But my own thought is that so much of what we consider science today, and so well explained some time ago, may have been considered magical, like being able to talk to people around the world while seeing their face through a rectangle in your hand, or even the understanding of magnetism, the alignment of electrons and iron atoms and so on. So many explanations seemed really magical in their time, but today we have understood it through two-eyed seeing. And I just wonder if someday these would seem like superstitions or cultural traditions, and our wonderful cultural traditions, tomorrow science will grow its perspective and help us understand those, because so many cultures have landed on similar threads. I just offer that with respect, that maybe one day what we call science in the modern Western worldview, whether science will catch up with this cultural knowledge.
Anyone else on the panel have anything you would like to add?
I guess. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that well, it's important that we, in our environment, it's more like everybody is a scientist in a way, because we have to observe our environment in order to survive. And our celestial and earthly and lunar observations encompass a system of survival. And also, when we discuss the the space, and the stars. Up here, sometimes we go through a period of time where we see no stars and no moon, just black darkness. It seems to happen only in the Arctic, and it happens around November. We also observe the moon and its lunar cycles. It never sets every 18 years. It never sets over the horizon, while the sun stays up every year. Only the moon rises over the horizon and stays above the horizon every 18 years. So we look at that cycle. And so a lot of the cosmic discussions seem to have all some kind of interrelated connection, in that we share the same information with different perspectives, depending on which part of the world we're in. And I think it speaks of a universal knowledge that we all share, which is not often discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. We'll turn to Alonso.
Oh, just to echo what Ron says, and just an observation about traditions and religions really springing up from a very deep connection to space and to their location. It's really fascinating. Today, still in tropics, the Lacandon people consider an eclipse to be an ant going up and chewing away at part of the sun and eating away at the sun, like a harvester ant will do, a leaf cutter ant. And so this idea is very evocative, I think, and you know, for ancient peoples, these were great deities that were involved in a cosmic dance, and so this reverence to astronomical bodies as being omnipresent and sometimes being susceptible to the effect of nature as well, you know, just like humans are as well. This is a really interesting kind of reflection about our understanding of our place and space. And so I think those ideas of things being harmful are very ingrained in us, because I think it's this reverence, you know, this really deep respect of the sky being really one of our great teachers and great a space, you know, that we can really project our lives onto.
Thank you very much. We have a list of really wonderful questions, and we don't have time to address them all. So want to pay my respects to those of you who did ask the questions. And I'm going to end with one question that addresses the wider work of the Indigenous Education Institute. So Cynthia LeBeau says, where is the Indigenous Education Institute? Which I think is a very interesting question in and of itself. How did you all connect to this event and the goals to share greater understandings through higher ed or interdisciplinarities? Saving language and culture and learning respect, ? Saving songs and prayers, ?
Well, Polly, you're our chair. Maybe you can take a stab at that question.
Well, I really love the first part of that question, because for me, I mean, we have an office in the state of Washington, but I think the Indigenous Education Institute circles the globe. The projects that you and David do with all of these amazing colleagues, some of whom we see on the screen, our board is an international board. So I think the Indigenous Education Institute is permeated throughout the cosmos, and it physically has an office in Washington. But then I'd love to hear from all of you about, how did you connect to this particular event? How did you decide, maybe Nancy and David, who to invite and to bring together? I know you spoke of, you said this was a dream of yours, Nancy. Maybe you could speak a little bit more to that.
Sure, I'd love to. We're pretty virtual. The office is really wherever David and might be, or I might be. We're pretty, we use people from our own families, but for this particular session, it's all people we knew or had a good connection to. Ron, I think, was the only one I hadn't known for a lot of years. And what we do with IEI is we call on our friends that we have trust built up over so many years. Our whole board and staff is Indigenous. Our mission is to preserve, protect, and apply this knowledge in this world we're living today. So it's not just something in a museum on a shelf. This is something that can be used today. We totally believe that the knowledge resides within the language, like David was saying earlier. That's where the deeper knowledge is. And I think we each would probably have a fascinating tale to, if we had time, to share on how we used our language to further our research. So basically, in a nutshell, these were all people we had known and we reached out to. And with Ron, we reached out to him through colleagues from our NASA group up in Alaska, the heliophysics group I mentioned, NASA HEAT. And NASA HEAT has been very encouraging to us to help us bring more awareness of Indigenous ways of knowing into great institutions like NASA. They listen, they give us opportunities to share our narratives. They, for an example, they are supporting this whole thing today. And as you ask the questions, I'm just wondering, how could we continue this? Maybe if all of the people that listened in, the ones that didn't, if they can go and just, you'll be able to download this whole recording on our website, www.indigenouseducation.org, and all of our series so far to date, there's 17 of them now, almost all of them are there for download for free. And but the other important thing is that at the end of this, we send out a brief survey, and if you write to us, you can write with some of your questions in the survey, and also if you'd like to see some kind of a continuation of this particular knowledge holder part of the series that we're doing today wrapped around the eclipse, but we could, if it's of great interest to you, let us know, and then we wrap our next sessions and the next sessions around what your interests are. So if you get back to us, that helps us decide who would be good. And if you like this idea of a panel discussion, some of these same people, we'd be happy to put together, another one and another one. So the next one we're doing is with Commander Nicole Mann, who is the first Indigenous woman astronaut, and she led 2 missions on the International Space Station. So she's going to be somebody that will come on and be a great inspiration, I think, to some of the younger people, the classes, elementary and middle school and high school classes, that will be able to listen to her a trajectory in the NASA world. But I want to just turn it back to some of you now to answer Polly's that question.
Can you hear me? This is David.
Yes.
Good. I since this is an IEI question, Indigenous Education Institute, I joined or we joined each other, Nancy and I, in the beginning, somewhere way back there, because we had common interests, and we were both interested in traditional knowledge, and somewhere it just evolved, and pretty soon we had people talking to us across the United States, Indigenous people throughout the world, people from Canada, First Nation, and then we interacted with so many people, some people with degrees, Indigenous people with degrees, science degrees, physics degrees, medical degrees, and we talk about how science can interact with Indigenous knowledge, and that we're in many ways talking about the same thing, except through different lenses, different ways of looking at things. For example, Western science, they use their own scientific method. And using cause and effect, when you use that method, you look at one thing, this cause affects that over there, and you localize it. You can even provide equation to it, and it gives you information. But Native people, if you put it within their holistic knowledge, it's not like the scientific method. They take everything into consideration, that one little cause affects everything. It's universal, evolution of a whole system. It's not just something local. So it's much bigger. So if you're going to use traditional knowledge, and one commonality that Indigenous knowledge, Native knowledge have is the interrelationship of all things. But if you go outside the classic science and talk to astrophysicists, astrobiologists, and quantum mechanics, and they have their own terms. for example, what I'm talking about, the interconnections of all things and that everything works together, they call it their holo movement. We're talking the same thing, that everything works together, nothing works by itself. And that's reality, and science say that's fact. Now, if a native person says the same thing, it's spiritual. It's like relegated to something else, but we're saying the same thing. So we have much to learn from each other. I think, indigenous knowledge to me is very complex. It's just a different way of saying things and different way of processing this information. A lot of the things that we're talking about, has its rooted back into indigenous language. There, if you use that indigenous definition, it's going to say something different from the English word that we're using. So a lot is lost through the translation process. So, whenever you go into indigenous language, whenever you talk about science, not only are you faced with a challenge that you're going to lose either way, and if you go too far from native to science, and then then you lose the original meaning that's in the indigenous language. You diminish the integrity and the meaning. It's no longer the traditional language that you want to express going through this translation process. I guess the same would be true if you reverse it. So, I think the key is really, having some really good communication. Just not going beyond just being nice to each other and nodding heads, and I mean real communication. I'll stop it there.
Thank you, David. Very important. So Nancy, I'm going to turn it back over to you, looking at the clock.
Okay, I guess I hate to bring this to a close, but we've always wanted to have an all Indigenous conference, and the time has never been right, and it probably still isn't quite there for funding and reasons and all kinds of other reasons. But this is about as close as you can get, where we get on a screen like this and share different Indigenous knowledges and philosophies, and somebody will say something will spark something in somebody else, and on many different levels. So I just want to thank you all for being part of this. I do want to, I do think we should bring this to a close because time is going by, but I think I do want to thank our technical supporter, Chris Tarrant of Tarrant Solutions, for making this happen so smoothly. Thank you, Chris. You always,
My pleasure.
always stay calm and things come out, and it's just a pleasure to work with you. He's also my son. I have to full disclosure here, and also my daughter, our daughter, Ashley Tarrant, who did the beautiful poster featuring all of your pictures and bios, and it was kind of heartbreaking to have to shrink them down to fit on the poster because you had so many wonderful things in your bios. We wanted to put them all in there. So anyway, please do answer some questions with the survey and stay in touch with us. And maybe there's some way we can get some, I don't know, maybe Chris, we could send out people's emails if I know there's some been requests if people could get back to some of us. So maybe, I don't know, Chris, if we can do that later, send out a message, just say these are the emails or these are some resources.
If you guys want your emails shared, let me know and I'll put them out there.
Okay, well, we'll let okay, one does, Tolga
Yeah.
does, Ron does. You can share mine too. Anybody else want to share? If not, you can let us know and we'll add you to the list. Okay. Well, thank you all so much. This has been a wonderful way to spend time and to prepare ourselves for this upcoming event on August 8th. So thank you all. And I guess we will bring this to a close.